64 game, retro gaming goodness.
Hey, Bastish B here for 64K and welcome to another episode of Top 10s.
Welcome to 64K, hosted by Bastish B.
And welcome back. This is another countdown video where I check out my top 10 favorite Commodore 64 games of 2024. And as per usual with these videos, I'll take a short stop just before the number one reveal and show you a bunch of honorable mentions. And let's not waste any more time and get on with the countdown.
Number 10.
Seawolves hit the C64 in March of 2024 by Kodiak 64. It's an homage to the classic Midway 1976 arcade game Seawolf, in which you pilot a submarine launching torpedoes taking out enemy ships. The game itself was based off Sega's first arcade game they ever produced called Periscope. There's been quite a few of these types of games on the old Braid box over the last few years, but this one really goes hard on options and style. The basics of the gameplay are exactly like the old arcade, as you play a submarine destroying as many enemy ships as possible in each round, while avoiding destroying civilian ships as well. Take out 3 of those and it's game over. There are 8 levels overall with 3 sub-levels in each one, and just like an old classic arcade game style, each level brings new additions to gameplay in the forms of enemies and other hazards. The game has a host of different modes, including 1-player, which is just straight up getting as far as you can and trying to rack up that high score. 2-player versus mode with your friend to see who can outlast each other or outscore each other. And wingman mode gives you a drone assistant to make the action more chaotic, with you having minimal control over it as well. It's personally the most fun mode in the game. And finally, AR rival mode. You can play 2 ways, either trying to outgun the AR or letting it make as much kills as you to keep the score even, and then it basically becomes your assistant. It packs in a lot of variety on a really simple concept. The graphics are really exceptional for something so straightforward. The use of high-res graphics and traditional sprites is always cool to see, and the color scheme is extremely vibrant. I love how many ships, vehicles, creatures there are, with helicopters, krakens, giant aircraft carriers, orcas, etc, etc. And the sound effects are nice and chunky. I'd highly recommend though you check out the PDF that comes with the game. It not only gives all the details about the gameplay and nuances, but also gives a bit of the making of the game. This digital version does have 2 major flaws for me though. The lack of music in the game at any point is kind of disappointing, and having no high score saver and a high score chaser game is very disappointing. If you read the PDF though, it was due to running out of memory, and the developer is hoping to release an enhanced cartridge edition in the future with all those extras added into the game. It's also PAL format only, and you get 2 digital versions, one for Vice, which this game was specifically made for, and one for a real PAL format C64. As it stands style-wise and gameplay, it's actually one of the best games of this type on the system, but it could actually be a modern classic in my mind, with those basic aforementioned extras added. So here's hoping that that cartridge version will make an appearance sooner rather than later.
Number 9.
Goodnight was released on the C64 in March of 2024 by Cytronic Software and is another Archon 64 release for 2024. This game has been released as part of the Cytronic Collection, bundled with Archon's other fantastic run and gun game, Har Haragon, in a 2-for-1 cartridge release. Like a lot of Archon's games, it's a modern C64 version of a classic C64 title, and in this case it's Ocean Software's 1983 release Hunchback, with its single-screen arcade-style gameplay. Goodnight takes this idea and updates it with a slick-looking graphic style and plenty of good medieval tunes from the ever-reliable Soul Cross. You play the knight, Sir Darren, as he attempts to rescue a princess from the clutches of a dragon. You have to make your way across castle parapets, one deadly screen at a time, with over 40 to navigate to get to the princess alive. The bottom of the screen has a small map giving you some sort of idea how much progress you've made as each screen's hazards try to kill you. You get eased into the action nicely with some basic screens before things start getting real tricky and deadly. Gameplay is as basic as an early 80s arcade game. Jump is basically your move. Simply make it from the left side of the screen to the right and grab the flagpole and it's off to the next screen. Hazards such as parkmen, fireballs, crossbow henchmen, Arrows, swings, saws all try to corpse you in a very quick and deadly way. Looking at the patterns and being ready to jump at a second's notice will keep you alive long enough to hopefully rack up some extra lives. The longer you last without losing a life and collecting those flags, the more score bonuses will be stacked. Getting 10 flags in a row and you'll get a free life. Timing is key to everything, there is no time limit. So with screens without arrows being launched at you, you can take your time and breathe. And I feel they do a nice mix of this throughout the game, although later it does get a little bit more manic. The graphics are detailed and look slick, almost like a late 80s, early 90s ocean style to them. You can also play the game with either music or sound effects. The game is easier difficulty wise with sound effects because it helps with hearing those hazards, especially arrows and fireballs. Besides the cartridge release, it's also available as a single tape version, and digital of course, which is compatible with the Mini, Maxi, real hardware, and is PAL and NTSC compatible. Like Icon's other recent releases, the digital also comes with bonus features, such as the complete SID soundtrack in MP3 form, and a printable disc cover and label if you want to make your own physical disc edition. It's a bunch of very nice little bonus extras. It's another well-made and fun arcade romp by Icon, updating a classic C64 release for the modern new wave, and I'll leave links in the video description for you to pick up the game.
We interrupt our program to bring you this important message.
Nixie and the Seeds of Doom was released on the Commodore 64 at the end of November 2024, a sequel to the 2021 release C64 game Nixie the Glade Sprite. Both games are updated Commodore ports of modern-day ZX Spectrum releases. Most of the same team did this wonderful port to the old breadbox, with both V and Jammer returning doing graphics and audio respectively, and Haplo joining this time on coding. No stranger to Spectrum ports, as seen by his awesome work on Ooze the Escape, ported to the breadbox in 2023. You play Nixie again, the Glade Sprite, who has to go on a quest to discover why her home is being corrupted again from outside forces. Her adventure takes her through 40 or so locations in flip screen style as she travels from the glade forests, castle settings, and deep underground, just like in the original game. It is a flip screen action platformer with lots of areas to unlock or gates to open new areas, plus fruit to collect. You have no defenses, it's all simply about jumping to avoid death in all different forms, such as ghosts, knights, and drowning, and all manner of traps such as disappearing platforms, sparks, and more. It's a very easy game to get to grips with, and with the touch of a spacebar you have access to a map screen where you can figure out where to go next. I also like that each screen represented has its own graphics, making it easier to identify its layout and in turn where to return later to maybe pick up some hidden fruit or get access to a new gate that's just opened. Graphically, it's got the high-res stylings of the original and looks amazing, very detailed, and great uses of color with nice animation as well. Music and sound effects are handled very well. You can have music only, music plus partial sound effects, and ambient with full sound effects, which is a very cool option. Plus the music itself has some real classic C64 vibes and wouldn't have sounded out of place in the many medieval fantasy games that Tim Follin scored. The game isn't huge overall though, and there's a lot of back and forth, but it has such a warm and inviting atmosphere with multiple difficulty settings, it never really gets annoying or tedious. The game is both PAL and NTSC compatible, although PAL is recommended as it was developed specifically for it. The game is also available for free or name your own price, and I'll leave links to Haplo's itch page to pick it up. Enjoy! Kingdom of the Seven Stones was released on the C64 in October of 2024 and published through The Future Was 8-Bit, a total throwback to one of the first genres of game I ever played on any computer, the text adventure game, or for me anyway, the graphic text adventure game. Spending countless hours on early games such as Arrow of Death and The Dallas Quest by Datasoft, then graduating to Melbourne House's The Hobbit, and then moving over to Polarware games such as Transylvania, and then going to the big leagues with my personal favorites from Level 9 and Magnetic Scroll releases such as Corruption, Guild of Thieves, and Scapegoat. And if you want to see more about a lot of these games, please check out my 2 Adventure Collection specials for more on these classic games in the genre. I'm also lucky enough to also be joined by the creator of this game today, but I'll let him introduce himself.
Thanks for having me. My name is Robin Raymond, and I'm from Ottawa, Canada, and I'm the author of the graphical text adventure game called Kingdom of the Seven Stones. So a bit about myself. I've been programming for a long time, and while I mostly do C++ these days to pay the bills, I can say that my first programming love will always be on the Commodore system.
Jumping back into the genre of game is always pretty fun. You have to really adjust the mindset and skills, and embrace the storyline above everything else, and figure out new ways to solve puzzles. The first question I asked Robin is, were there any classic games that inspired his love of the genre?
My first experience with graphical text adventures was on an Apple II in my elementary school, which was called The Coveted Mirror. I loved that game. This captivated me, and from the moment I moved that bed to find an escape route, I was hooked. Another game I played and loved was called Ulysses and the Golden Fleece, which I had on my home Commodore 64 computer. I spent every spare moment I could playing that game and being enthralled and lost in that world of imagination. I wanted to create a game with ambiance, both visually and textually, to help the player be part of this world and hopefully get captivated by it. Both of those games that I fell in love with had beautiful graphics, and they gave clues about their worlds. And while the text parsers were not as powerful as like those you would find in the Infocom days, I felt like I was in control of the stories, and I loved that. I wanted to pay tribute to both of those games that inspired me all those years ago to be able to merge the 2 eras together for the Kingdom of the Seven Stones. I have some of the old world mythology beings survive from those ancient times, which then create challenges as well as opportunities to help you overcome the evil that plagues the land.
We interrupt our program to bring you this important message.
The story is what really drives the genre of games at the heart of it, and in Kingdom you set out to basically help people across the land become a legend or a beacon of hope for all the people you encounter and the quest you complete. It is actually quite vague in its overall plot, but that's not a negative in any way. I was curious though if the storyline's vague open-ended design was intentional or not.
Yes, the vagueness was intentional. This was to mirror what I experienced when I first played games. For example, many of the load and save games would have very nondescript introductions and throw you directly into the game. You had to figure out why you were there and what was your purpose. I do leave a few breadcrumbs though. At the first junction, you have 2 paths to choose from. One path leads you into the town, and the other path leads you into a dark forest. And that dark forest tries to confuse you and keep you out because it's guarding the evil that looms over the town. I really like the idea of having innocent townsfolk unaware of the danger and tragedy that's about to befall them if they are left to their fate. And while the player knows they have to accomplish something, the people in the town do not. The other clue that I leave in the game is that the first character that you run across is a guard that warns you that the only path is a righteous path. And not to give out too many spoilers, but it's possible to behave in a malicious manner in the game, including turning people to stone or stealing objects to get ahead. But those will backfire because the townsfolk will turn against you and no longer cooperate in ways that you will need to be able to complete the game.
Gameplay is very traditional for the genre. Compass directions for movements, north, south, east, west, and everything in between, collecting objects and using them to solve or complete quests. I actually did a video when I first started this channel on how to play the genre of game. If you've never played them before or need some help, and I'll leave links in the video description if you're interested. The parser system here is quite good, meaning it understands most basic commands you're going to need for this game. It emphasizes talking to characters especially. This is how you get most of your quests or find out what people across the land want or need. Some require a series of events to happen to obtain an item. Others are quite simple in nature, like returning a blacksmith's axe you find in the forest, or reading a poem to a blind woman. Even though in the beginning you do feel a little bit lost, once you visit the main castle village, quests come in fast and furious, and you may want to write some of those down, or else you're definitely going to lose track of them all. Also remember, just like back in the day, simply type in the command help and you'll get a lot of basic information that'll aid you to play the game and understand its parser system easier. I asked Robin how easy it is now to make these kinds of games with all the modern tools available.
All of the development was using modern tooling for Kingdom of the Seven Stones. In many ways, many of the tools I would have needed to build the game were around in the 80s, but the speed and ease of development were not the same. With modern editors, you can keep dozens of program files open simultaneously, and reloading the game and freezing at breakpoints, and examining the raster lines and the emulator chip states are all done with a few simple clicks and button pushes. It's inconceivable to have that level of speed of development back in the 80s. I used Python to compile all of the text, graphics, and songs, and the game objects and locations into game assets. I used Martin Piper's Music Studio 2, which he generously helped me throughout, to convert MIDI files into SID sequences. And all the debugging that I did was done mainly on the Vice emulator, as it was capable of running the 8 megabit cartridges. This level of tooling would have been a dream to have in the 80s.
The graphics in this game are quite impressive. To my untrained programming eye, they look like digitized photos. On a CRT though, they look obviously even more stunning. But with over 100 plus images in the game overall, which is a huge amount, considering the quality, I was wondering about the method around the graphics and simply the sheer size of the game itself, which would have traditionally come on about 3 double-sided discs.
In the past, many graphical text adventures would rely upon vector drawings, which are stylishly more cartoonish in nature. They were absolutely beautifully done, and I have no criticism of them. But that level of skill to be able to draw those images and then translate them into a series of drawing commands, that's something I didn't have. I was sadly not blessed with the ability to draw in a comic book style. So yes, this game uses digitized photos, which is yet another reason why I could not have made the game back in the peak of the Commodore 64's popularity. Back then, image scanners were in their early infancy, extremely expensive and uncommon. Fortunately, I found a program called the Dithertron. Takes an image, introduces purposeful noise to create perception of additional colors that don't exist on the actual system, but it didn't quite properly support the color block RAM. So I spent a fair bit of time modifying the tool to support the Commodore. As for where I sourced images, this might be a tad more controversial, but I used AI to help me, and then edited the images to make them be what I needed them to be. To me, AI is an enabling technology, because without it, I don't think that such a small niche market could justify the amount of money that I would need to hire artists to produce these sets of images, let alone create sets with real actors dressed for the part and then transpose them into 3D virtual spaces. Basically, it was either AI or have no game at all. But having said that, of course, I'm all for artists being paid for their work and the ethical usage of artist material in AI training models. These tools certainly allow you to have creative ways to do things that you wouldn't normally have. Each image in the game takes about 8 kilobytes of space. While that might not seem like a lot, when you have over 100 unique images for each of the locations, and you factor in all the image variations needed to display or remove objects from the scenes, that adds up fast. Then you also need to have space for the text that goes with those locations. I probably have around 200 kilobytes of just text alone in this game. I also included a handful of songs at key locations to further capture the imagination. And all of this was done just to create the game's ambiance. The future was 8-bit. put a call out on their prior website asking for game developers who could take advantage of their newly released cartridge format called the Marina 64. What this cartridge allows you to do is basically have up to a capacity of 8 megabits of space. So I answered their calling, and they graciously agreed to take me on board and publish the game if I could produce something that was well done and interesting and worthwhile. I ended up extensively using compression to fit the game into the cartridge, but unfortunately a few things did need to be sacrificed. Nothing I felt that really changed the trajectory of the game, and I tried to make it so that everything still flowed properly.
Wandering this land is pretty awesome. It feels very open and non-restrictive. And to help you along, if you downloaded the digital version, you get a starter walkthrough to help you get going, and even a map so you can get a better idea of where you are and how big the actual world is. There are many musical tracks in the game as well, queued in certain locations, which is a nice addition, as these games generally speaking are usually silent or may have the odd spot effect. Which begs the question, how long did it take Robin to make this game from start to finish?
The development of the game took well over a year. Mind you, I do have a day job where I develop C++, so I was only able to complete the game during my spare time. This was a true passion project for me though, so I was motivated to finish as soon as I could. I wanted to contribute to the community something new and fresh as a tribute to all the games that I spent so many hours playing in my youth.
We interrupt our program to bring you this important message.
Overall, I really enjoyed my time with this game. The world is pretty big and there's interesting characters around every little corner. Most of the puzzles and situations are quite logical, and you can even be a complete bastard to most people, but that will ultimately be your downfall. I, like Robin, have zero artistic drawing skills, so being able to use AR art to help make things we could never do before possible is very liberating creatively. Cue the melodramatic meltdowns in the comments section. I just wanted to thank Robin and every creator out there, as always, for taking the time to make this game for our good old humble C64. It's always appreciated, not just by me, but I'm sure everyone who enjoyed this obscure subgenre from back in the day. As usual, I'll end this with asking Robin a question I do for everybody else. What's the drive to make a C64 game in the modern age?
These older machines represent an era of simplicity and innocence at the birth of the computer revolution. A person can fully control everything that's happening within these computers while being challenged to squeeze everything possible out of the limited hardware resources that you have available. It's really hard to replicate that. So if I was going to produce something that a small number of people would enjoy, I would want to do it for a system like the Commodore 64 to be a part of breathing new life into the platform. I love how our communities still keep all of these retro systems alive and not just discarded into the e-waste trash bins of history. I also think these machines are excellent learning machines. Modern computers have too many black boxes between the programmer and the hardware. This is where I first learned to program, and I'm forever grateful to have learned how computers work during this era. And I was lucky enough to come into an era before the operating systems took complete control of everything. Well, thanks for having me on your show, and for anyone who wants to reach out to me, feel free to email me at robin@myjoe.com. Thanks again.
The game is available as a physical cartridge from the Future Was 8-Bit website, and it's both PAL and NTSC compatible. When you buy it, you can also request a digital download if you need it, which includes the map and the small walkthrough. It's also available straight from Robin himself on his itch page in digital form, and I'll leave all the links in the video description. Thank you for watching.
Number 6.
Tony Montezuma's Gold, the Commodore 64 version, was released in May of 2024 by Monochrome Productions, a fast-paced action platformer that harkens back to classic 8-bit gaming, where one button was all you needed for a rip-roaring adventure. Today I'm also joined by Majima Maleki, the programmer and sound effects creator of the C64 version of this game, but I'll let him introduce himself.
Hi, my name is Maciej Małecki. I am from Poland and I'm a programmer of the Commodore 64 version of the game Tony the Montezuma's Gold. I was the happy owner of Commodore 64 starting from 1990. I think I was using this computer for 4 years, and later, like 8 or 9 years ago, I have restored that one from the attic when it was stored for over 20 years. I'm happy owner of this machine again.
Tony itself as a game was actually inspired by real-life adventures of Polish explorer and documentary filmmaker Tony Halleck, who would travel the world and document ancient civilizations and cultures unlike anyone else had done before. He spoke 8 languages, created over 400 documentaries, and wrote 13 books. Truly a legend of his time. The game throws you in the role of Tony, an Indiana Jones-style adventurer and journalist, who gets a hot tip about Montezuma's treasure from his boss and decides to head out immediately to explore the temple and report on it before his rival Miguel can do his puff piece report on the subject. Apparently Montezuma's mask is more than just a simple treasure. This is all told through comic book style panels in the wonderfully atmospheric intro to the game. I first wanted to ask, what were the actual video games that may have inspired Tony's design?
Well, the inspiration, basically I would say the game creator is someone else, as I said. This is Rafał, and he designed this game for his son. But I mean, if you look at the game, you can easily guess, because the game itself is clearly inspired by the great Montezuma's Revenge. Of course, the game mechanism, the physics are really like very similar to that game. The way you control the main character, like with the jumping, with the fire press, it's also coming from Montezuma. And basically, when you make a jump, you cannot steer the jump. This is explicitly coded after Montezuma. But also, I mean, if you look closer at the game, because the Montezuma itself had a clone, which was basically the Rick Dangerous. So there are some elements from Rick Dangerous also visible in this game. So I'd say this is basically the mixture. I think the mixture of the childhood memories from Rafał, basically.
Gameplay-wise, Tony is very easy to get to grips with, and despite death lurking around every screen Rick Dangerous style, I found it to be a pretty relaxing game to play, with no time limit over your head. Each screen is just like a little adventure to take on itself. Tony has no attacks, he can simply duck to avoid creatures or traps, and jump. It's as simple as that, and that's what makes it such a chill game to enjoy. It's got 5 levels in total to traverse through, each being fairly large and made up of many flip screens, with treasures to collect for points and bonus lives, potions to collect which act as shields just like Montezuma's Revenge, allowing you to survive creature hits depending on how many bottles you are carrying at any one time, and keys which are used to open up doors in a level to progress further or just simply escape the stage. Levels are filled with enemies such as bats, tribesmen, snakes, etc, plus sparks and arrow traps and much more. Although gameplay wise it never feels quite as annoying or overtly difficult in any way, and if you are killed or get hit by an enemy they will remain dead, making certain slightly more challenging sections easier to complete at the cost of a life or a potion. I then asked how long this version of the game has been in development for.
It took me exactly a whole year to develop the Tony from scratch. I basically had nothing except a working Amiga version and a bunch of instructions. Of course I had a complete graphics, because graphic was provided by the game creator Rafał Dudek, but the code I have to start and I have to code it from scratch. So basically it took me a whole year. I haven't counted let's say the working hours, but initially when I was rushing to release the demo version as soon as possible, I was working like an every day during the evenings for like 2 or 3 hours per day. That was actually quite a lot, and it was very surprising that this game, it looks very simple and basically the graphics is ready, will take so much time to develop.
We interrupt our program to bring you this important message.
The graphic style of this game is definitely not what you'd usually used to seeing on the C64, but it immediately makes it unique and interesting. Its high-res, sharply designed monochrome graphics immediately invokes the look and stylings of a 1950s style adventure movie. Everything looks great, from the slick menu system to the comic book intro and the well-animated creatures and levels themselves. It's a nice, polished looking game that also, with the press of the F1 key at any time during gameplay, can switch out the color palette to give the look of multiple different late 70s to mid 80s computers, which is usually something you only see in modern game designs, so you can play it in the color scheme that's most nostalgic for you. I then asked, were there any major challenges in bringing this game to the C64?
First thing is that when I actually accepted or took this job, so to say, I wasn't really expecting any challenges, but the game itself doesn't look really complex. Yeah. But when I started to discuss this with Rafael to the closer details, then of course I have learned that it will not be very trivial. The game initially was designed for 8-bit Atari, and as we know, the 8-bit Atari, of course, this is why the game is monochrome in a high res. So for the Commodore 64, of course, we can display like a 16 characters exactly, with an ease. But Atari itself is slightly faster. I mean, the CPU is faster. But then after a few discussions, I met some on some discussion forums devoted to the Commodore 64 coding. I have actually discovered that I can implement this game in text mode, but if I treat each the room separately, and this is the flip screen game, I can do this. And I think that the performance is better than the Atari 8-bit, because on Atari, you don't have 256 characters, you have half of it. Therefore also the full version is disk or cartridge only. It's not the single filer, because it's definitely not possible to code to squeeze the game into single file. It's just too much assets. Currently, for the module that I have devoted for the coding, I have like 328 bytes left. That's it. Yeah. But the game is finished now, so maybe this will be used for the, let's say, updated version later on.
The soundtrack to this game is exceptional, and that's not just because I'm a SID junkie at heart, but it's simply addictive, spurring you on to go deeper into the temple, not only to discover more, but also to listen to those wonderful tunes. From the intro, to the menu, to the fantastic level music. It's a real SID treat of the highest quality, done by Adam Gilmour and Sami Juntunen. Adam did the only good thing about the European C64 version of Afterburner, aka the cool music, and a whole host of other great ones, from Blinky's Scary School to Draconis. And Sammy did the music for Vector 5's 2022 underrated C64 game Jungle Joe, which is definitely worth checking out. The game also supports sound effects or music to be chosen at the beginning, and besides changing the atmosphere of the game, playing with simply the excellent on-point sound effects alone helps make the game much easier due to the oral cues you get from many actions of the enemies. So I'd also recommend trying it out for a completely different vibe to the game. I then asked a little bit more about the rest of the team that helped make this game.
Well, Tony is actually a serious project, because we have produced, or we have created 3 ports for 3 different platforms. So Commodore 64, of course, it's 4 people. It's Rafał Dudek, the game creator and the creator of the graphics. It is Sami Juntunen, a musician from Finland, who has composed 2 great tunes, and famous Adam Gilmour, who has created 7 more tunes. So we have quite a lot and quite a varied soundtrack. Now, of course, myself, a programmer. Yeah, so as you see, it's quite a lot of people, and we have a lot of people that are helping us with testing, and everybody just made a great job. So it's a big project. Surprisingly big project just for some retro game.
Overall, Tony, Montezuma's Gold is another gem in the C64 New Wave library that seems to have no slowdown in sight, which is exciting for all us veterans of the old breadbox. It's a wonderful job by the entire team. The C64 version is available as a digital download, and there will also be a full boxed version available in physical form that looks absolutely amazing for you to order as well. Plus there's also the Atari and Amiga versions available. My final question is one I pose to everyone making modern C64 games. What is the drive to make these games considering the C64's limits?
The motivation can be very different, but I think what's the common denominator? The common denominator is that we were perhaps the first generation people to be able to really own personal computer, which means that you have a completely free access to it. You don't have to go somewhere and buy the access to the mainframe. I mean, this is the computer that is affordable. You can buy it and plug to very simple devices like a TV. Basically, we were all delighted with this. I mean, most of us perhaps were just the computer video game players. Some of us, like for instance myself, I became a professional programmer after this. Here in Poland, we were a little bit time shifted because it was very, very difficult to be able to buy the most popular mainstream computer, the Commodore 64. It was just too expensive for us. And also I think that Jack Tramiel has conquered or has targeted his 8-bit computers for the Eastern Europe bloc because of his own personal, let's say, heritage. So it was already Commodore 64, because everything shifted. This computer was now completely legal to import to Poland. I was completely astonished by the quality titles, such as Giana Sisters or Last Ninja or this kind of stuff. I was liking those blocky graphics with those 16 colors. I was really a big fan of it, and the SID music as well. So I would say I was also having fun. So the last part of the motivation speech is, because I have fun. This is extremely rewarding thing. I can run the code, I can run it on the real hardware, I can play, I can plug the joystick, I can went through my own game, and I'm a horrible player. I'm completely lame when it comes to playing the game, and the only game I'm mastered without trainer is my own games, because I have to do it, because I have to test it. But that's it. That's the story. Thank you. Thank you for an interview.
A wonderful production by Monochrome. Hopefully this won't be the last from this team. It's an enjoyable, challenging, yet fair adventure that harkens back to Montezuma's Revenge and Rick Dangerous while being its own game, all the same. Links to the digital download are in the video description. Enjoy the adventure.
We interrupt our program to bring you this important message.
Har Haragon was released on the C64 in March of 2024 by Psytronic Software and programmed by the stellar Commodore 64 team Archon 64, made up of Stuart Collier on programming, Trevor Story on graphics and design, and Soul Cross on music. Easily the best team out there for consistent high-quality C64 releases in the modern new wave Commodore scene. Har Haragon is a mixture of two genres, a whole lot of Metroidvania style exploring, and a large dose of excellent run and gun action. The story for the game has you as a character named 64K, who's been imprisoned on the spaceship Har Haragon by the Galactic King, who didn't like the fact that a simple soldier fell in love with his daughter, Nico. But with a little help from her, you get a gun and are tasked with putting together an escape pod scattered all over the ship, which will reunite you with Nico if completed. This game is extremely easy to get into, and in no time you'll be exploring and making progress. And thanks to the really nifty automat feature on the right of the screen, it's very easy to know where you have been, but also more importantly, rooms are marked if you get to them and cannot get an item, or still has something you need to do. For the most part, which I really like, the entire ship is open to explore. You can make your way right to the bottom of the ship and back, but just also bear in mind the enemies are a little bit more trickier and deadly, so be careful with the further you go. The action is extremely satisfying, with you having full 8-way shooting ability, kinda like the arcade game Midnight Resistance, which makes the action very versatile and much more engaging than usual. You have to collect certain key cards to open certain rooms and sections, as the pod pieces are spread all over the ship. You can also upgrade your gun with crystals dropped from killing enemies. Every 200 crystals boost your gun's firepower and distance. There are also other items like temporary shields to pick up and health pickups spread throughout the facility. They are a bit few and far between, so being careful and not running reckless is advised. The ship itself is actually pretty big, with 230 screens to explore, and does require a little bit of enemy grinding to upgrade your gun, but the game is very well balanced, so not much of that is needed if you play the game with some sort of decent skill. The high-res graphics look is pretty cool. I like the simplicity of it. The gameplay is very good, easy to control, and gets much better as using the environment and angles of your gun, shots to take out enemies and distances becomes a fun mechanic to master. Soul Cross's music is top notch on this one. It has a great thumping SID for the main game and some other really cool tracks for the loader and menu. It suits this game extremely well. You can also play it simply with sound effects if that's your wish. As per usual with Archon 64 games, it's compatible with the Mini and Maxi, real hardware, and it's both PAL and NTSC compatible in digital form. There's also a physical tape version and a double pack physical cartridge release with their other game, Goodnight, in one package. I really like the extras you get with the digital version as well, such as the full SID soundtrack in MP3 form so you can rock out on your way to work, and a printable disc and label template if you want to make your own physical disc version. It's some really great little extras. Overall, this game is just an excellent romp, and I wouldn't hesitate to recommend it to any C64 gamer of any skill level because of how well it's balanced. Links to pick up the game are in the video description. Enjoy. This one's been a long time coming. Loading up any new C64 game, I'm always a little bit nervous, hoping I'm not going to be disappointed. I dived right in and died immediately. Spelunky was now on my C64, and all manner of death and exploration awaited me. Spelunky, now known as Spelunky 64, hit the bread box in September 2024, a new interpretation of the original 2008 Windows release, created by Derek Yu. I first played this as the 2012 Xbox 360 port. I both loved and hated it at the same time. However, this new C64 version is its own beast, and for the better as far as I'm concerned. Today I'm also joined by Paul Kohler, programmer and graphics artist for this new C64 version, but I'll let Paul fully introduce himself.
I'm Paul Kohler. I've been making C64 games on and off for the last 10 years or so. Most, if not all, of my C64 projects have been ports of relatively modern games, and I typically do all the programming and graphics myself, while for music and sound effects I've worked together mainly with Mikkel Hastrup, but also other musicians.
If you're unfamiliar with the original Spelunky, it's a platform exploration roguelike, meaning you only get one life, and the overall goal is to get as far as you can exploring the caves, looting for as much treasure as possible, saving damsels in distress, and trying really hard not to die. If you're unfamiliar with Paul himself, he's been over the last decade porting so many excellent modern indie games to the C64, like he said earlier, officially, with my two personal favorites being Super Bread Box, a crazy shoot 'em up masterpiece, and Luftrausers, an excellent version of the PC Ultimate World War II airplane shooter. With those official releases, I asked Paul about getting getting the official approval of the original developer for his ports.
For Spelunky, as well as the other ports that I did in the past, I always try to contact the original designers. They are all very enthusiastic about the port and typically help spread the word once the game is finished. This significantly increases the outreach so that more people can enjoy these games.
Spelunky is a tough game, there's no two ways about it. But you have lots of tools and options at your disposal. Jumping over chasms onto bad guys' heads Mario style. You also have a default whip for close quarter kills or stuns of the enemies, and bombs which can be used to blow open areas of the map or enemies. These are limited though. You can buy more in random shops as well as other upgrades. Your rope is also limited, allowing you to essentially climb up and down to any area. More can also be bought or found. I asked Paul what drew him to converting Spelunky to the C64.
Spelunky is a procedurally generated platformer and is often seen as a modern day classic. No game like it exists for the C64, while it would make a perfect fit for such an 8-bit platform since you don't need as much memory to storage large level maps. So with the source code being publicly available, I knew that a good port would be possible even while staying within the limits of only 64 kilobytes. And a nice thing of procedurally generated games is that it also stays fun for me as a developer to play, since it's always a surprise what the game throws at you.
The game has 16 levels in total. Everything is randomly generated, so no two playthroughs are ever the same. Enemies, traps and environments also change the further you go, from regular cave settings to terrarium style greenery, icy blue death traps and lava filled temple structures. It's all very rewarding seeing a new set every time. I asked Paul if there was any modifications he had to do to get the game running on the C64.
During development, memory was the biggest challenge. A lot of the content is stored packed and is unpacked only when needed. For example, there are about 128 high-res overlaid player sprite images, which alone would already fill up a quarter of the full available memory. And instead, these images are unpacked and flipped in real time only when needed.
There's tons of fun little touches all over the place in this game. Abuse a shopkeeper and he will murder you. Whip a girl and she'll run off in terror. Steal a golden idol and be prepared for a trap. From being forced into a spark room to an Indiana Jones style boulder being launched at you. There's lots of nice little moments like this all over the place.
Differences with the original Spelunky Classic are only minimal. All 4 different worlds are in. Most of the enemies, traps, as well as most of the items are included. The biggest thing that did not make it in is the sacrificial altar. I just didn't have the memory available anymore in the end.
The graphics are very slick. I always love that high-res look. Detail with a lot of variety in the stages the further you go. The animation is also very well done. Mikael Hastrup, a regular musical contributor to Paul's games, delivers some nice set of ominous background tunes and a bevy of appropriate sound effects. It all comes together very well in the end. I was curious to know how long Paul had been working on this game for overall.
Spelunky has been a long time in the making. I think I started already somewhere in 2017 when we were still working out some publishing details on loot browsers. I quickly got the player movement and map generation already implemented. However, putting all the small details and interaction in took quite some time. And during these years also motivation was not always high. And since it's all just a hobby, it can be tough dedicating a lot of your spare time in getting these projects finished once the initial fun parts are coded. So beginning of 2023 I set myself a deadline to finish the game that year, which did help in the end.
I had a lot of fun playing this overall. The Xbox 360 version's annoying timer always ruined it for me. You cannot take forever to complete the levels here either, but it was never really an issue like in that version. Jumping on and off ladders is a bit annoying, and the random level generator can either make your playthrough an absolute breeze or hard as hell due to the random nature of it. But still, it's a very well made new wave C64 release that I wouldn't hesitate to recommend. I'll leave links in the video description for the digital download from Paul's itch page. The game is recommended for PAL systems, but it is also NTSC compatible, and you can also play it on your real C64 via flash cart or other digital reading devices. Enjoy the adventure.
We interrupt our program to bring you this important message.
Number 3.
Yeti Mountain hit up the Commodore 64 in January 2024, published by Protovision, and has been a long in the making project and another high-quality, larger-in-scale production with multiple gameplay styles and a fun story to get behind. But before we dive deeper into it, I was fortunate enough to speak to two key members of the team about the making of the game, and I'll let them introduce themselves.
My name is Russell Mills, and I'm the coder for Yeti Mountain.
My name is Louis Domovsky, and I'm responsible for Yeti Mountain's story concept. I also work with Russell in coming up with the various gameplay designs within Yeti Mountain.
The game puts you in the shoes of a guy who has gone to a ski resort below Yeti Mountain to try and find his friend Chris, who has mysteriously gone missing, and maybe even unfold whether the mythical Yeti exists as well. The game didn't always have a plot or even multiple gameplay styles. It was in its original form much more basic, but I'll let the team explain.
It all started with a desire to recreate Microsoft's Ski Free.
But when Russell decided he wanted to add some sort of story mode, we first branched out in the ski or die direction.
But as we branched out into a larger, more story-driven game, I do remember really wanting the player to be able to walk around and explore the world.
When Russell first showed me the resort map view, he went overboard and effectively recreated a whole ski resort with interior locations, and things just took off on a different tangent that drew all sorts of inspiration, including Killed Until Dead, Isle of Cursed Prophet, Soulless, and Power Glove.
And one game that came to my mind was Times of Law. It was an absolute favourite growing up. So I think that influenced the initial resort concept.
Yeti as a game is split into 3 acts, almost like a classic movie structure. Each act serves as a gameplay switch. The beginning of the game feels a lot like a JRPG as you arrive in the resort, where you can talk to everyone you come across as you search out the ski village to get your bearings. You have a nifty map with your location as you start to investigate Chris's disappearance. At the resort is also 3 different ski runs you can go and participate in. Completing each one of these helps advance the story in some sort of way. You have downhill freestyle, a slalom event, and jumps, rails, and tricks. Each has a different criteria to complete, from time to points earned, and these all add a bit of variety to the game and break up the investigation elements. I actually got to play a 99% finished version of this game a few weeks before its release, and I found the skiing sections to be pretty difficult, but what I can say is that this final version, the difficulty has been toned down quite a lot, and so is the criteria, and I think that's actually a good thing. I also asked the team if the multi-gameplay style was always part of their original design.
Once we shifted the project to become more of a quest exploration style of game, then the whole game was supposed to be presented in a top-down view like you see in episode 1, with ski events intersecting the gameplay. But we were struggling to figure out what to do with the game when it moved to the second Cave Lair episode, and Russell took the initiative to try switching the view to a multi-scrolling platformer, and we both kind of sensed that we had stumbled onto something pretty cool.
Act 2 involves your deeper investigation into Chris's disappearance, with you exploring some subterranean caves in search of more clues. This is my favorite part of the game as it switches to a very slickly presented and plain action platformer. It's about exploring and gaining new abilities to further your progression, and that's the aspect I like the most about this game, is the constant sense of accomplishment as you gain new gameplay additions for your character, and the fact that all your gained abilities and clues are shown in the bottom right of the screen, always reminding you of what you've discovered or the new abilities you have. The Yeti story elements also get ramped up in this section and gives you a sense that you're close to something big. I also asked the team how important it was to add modern gameplay tropes into retro titles being made now.
Very much so. Our objective was to keep people playing the game as long as possible and to guide them to experience all that the game has to offer and to complete it. And you can only do this by borrowing ideas from current generation games.
Act 3 is a mixture of both skiing and light puzzle elements as you escape an avalanche and have to stop at the emergency warning centers and activate them by replacing the batteries, puzzle game style, all under a strict timer as the fate of you and the ski lodge below is at stake. This is a frantic race against time that I enjoyed quite a lot, and depending on how you resolve a certain situation in the caves will depend on what ending you receive. That's assuming you survive the avalanche, that is. I asked the team how long this game was in development for.
I started back in early 2021 on a C64 version of Ski Free. Now initially the idea was to enter it into the Cassette 50 charity competition.
I joined what was then known as the Ski Free 64 project towards the end of September 2021.
But as the project progressed, I realised that I wanted the game to be something more, so I approached Louis for some feedback. That led to seeing if he'd be interested in collaborating.
But I first connected with Russell a few months before when he asked me for feedback on the ski engine he was working on.
To my surprise, he said yes, and eventually the concept of Yeti Mountain was born.
The graphics and sound are very good, with the graphics being detailed and smooth with great portrait shots of the characters and elaborate story cutscenes which boost their overall quality, and has a very nice subtle soundtrack in a Soul Cross manner, complementing the atmosphere but not taking away your attention from the gameplay. I asked the guys about some of the other team members working on the project.
Can you believe that this is Russell's first full-size C64 game? He's such an impressive coder and a great person to collaborate with. We came up with so many good and not so good ideas together, and all times it felt like we were in sync. Yeti Mountain is also Rolly's debut C64 project, and I loved his enthusiasm for what we were doing. It certainly shows in the SID music he produced for us, and he greatly impressed me as a music composer. Monty Boy joined the project much later on. I was sensing that Russell was feeling the burden of doing all the graphics for the cutscenes we had planned, and it just happened that around this time, during his interview on Hands On Gaming Podcast, Monty revealed that pixel art was his first passion. I approached him about joining the team, and thank God he agreed. His graphical output elevated the whole project to a AAA level, as far as I'm concerned.
An incredibly talented bunch of guys that it's been a real pleasure working with. I'm so grateful for their hard work and very proud of what we've accomplished as a team.
Overall, Yeti Mountain is a wonderful C64 game that looks retro but plays with modern sensibilities, and is well crafted in many ways, from the multiple well-balanced gameplay shifts, very well edited dialogue and story elements that don't overstay their welcome, with lots of good humor to boot. I did personally find the skiing sections to be pretty difficult. I broke another C64 Maxi joystick while playing this game, but like I said earlier, these sections have been toned down dramatically in terms of difficulty, which I think overall makes this a much better game. This also made me think about what challenges the team must have faced to bring this project to completion.
As the coder of the game, Russell often had the challenge of bringing my ideas to fruition.
For me, I'd never coded on a C64 before, never designed a game, so it was a pretty steep learning curve.
I'd come up with a concept and he'd go away for a week and deliver the goods. I was constantly amazed at how proficient of a coder he is.
But when Louis joined the team, he really did bring a wealth of experience and knowledge that I think really helped point us in the right direction. Although there were times Louis would come up with some really great suggestions, I'd go away, attempt to implement them, then he'd politely reject the ones that didn't work and we'd have to try something else.
He even spent a few weeks delivering a grapple gun mechanism I had asked for. It worked really well, but I ended up shelving it because it slowed the gameplay down. Sorry for that, Russ.
But ultimately, I have to say, it was a really fun process.
We interrupt our program to bring you this important message.
The game is available from Protovision as a digital download for use on Vice, the Mini, Maxi and original hardware, and is both NTSC and PAL compatible, so just check the links in the video description to download the game. A physical version will be available later in 2024, so keep checking Protovision for more details. And a question I always like to pose to every C64 developer I interview is what drives them to make modern games on the limited C64 in the modern age?
Well, it's a machine that's held a special place in many young people's hearts, and I'm certainly no exception. I remember being fascinated by this system as a child.
It simply boils down to the passion and nostalgia we hold for the Commodore 64 and wanting to create something that has the room to be appreciated by a mature audience.
So much so, I dreamt one day I'd make my own game, and although it's taken me 30 odd years, I finally fulfilled that dream. Looking back now, it's been an absolutely amazing journey. I've met some great and talented people along the way. My love and nostalgia for the old bread bin has only grown. Hopefully some of this comes across in the game and you experience at least some of the joy that we have in putting it together.
It represents simpler times. You want real life graphics and experiences? Then go outside and enjoy life with your friends and family, but only after you spend a couple of hours playing Yeti Mountain, of course.
And that's Yeti Mountain, another quality game to add to the C64's modern library.
Number 2.
Infestation was released on the Commodore 64 at the end of November 2024, another game from the very talented Australian coder Monty Boyd, who's given us exclusive gems on the system in the last few years, like the great racing game Muddy Racers and the excellent arcade action of Knights and Slimes. Monty is also joining us today to tell us some of the behind-the-scenes info about his latest action run-and-gun platformer, but I'll let him introduce himself.
Hi, I'm Monty Boyd. By day I'm a UX designer for a bank. By night I'm a C64 game programmer, designer and pixel artist.
Infestation puts you in the role of the Galactic Sheriff, as she gets a call to investigate a mysterious space station that's gone haywire. You and your robot companion, who acts as your comlinks throughout the game, enter the station to try and solve the mystery. I first asked Monty how long he has been actually working on this game for.
I think all up it was around 2.5 years, but that's working on it between other projects before it became my main focus.
Gameplay is a mix of a lot of aspects. For the most part, it's an action platformer, but it also has elements of run-and-gun gameplay and even doses of strategy. As you start exploring the station and its big 36 levels, you'll mostly be blasting alien and robot scumbags away with your massive gun. Kill a certain amount of enemies in an area and a door will unlock and you'll be able to move on to the next area. There's no finding multicolored passkey nonsense here. Your battle suit makes it possible to do multiple other things as well, which are basically power-ups. Collect as many of the yellow powered crystals as possible to build up your bar at the bottom right of the screen. This will determine how long you'll be able to use your special for. Collecting a certain colored item box will trigger the special, which can, for one, power up your suit, making it possible to kill enemies with single punches. Enable a powered jetpack, allowing you to fly around the levels taking out enemies. Speed boosts, which come in handy with clusters of enemies, screen-killing bombs that take care of business, and the ability to transform into a killing star like in Turrican, and massacre as much as possible or run over whoever gets in your way. Every main area of the ship, which there are 3 of, throws a bunch of extra little gameplay nuggets into the mix as well. For example, the anti-gravitation is knocked out in an area, allowing you to float around the levels, and changes the action bit quite a lot. There's toxic chemicals to avoid, one-way style elevators, which require some planning when taking out foes, lights that can be knocked off, and all the enemies have their own personalities, so learning that will help you trap them and kill them quickly. I really like the fact that each enemy, including the 3 big boss characters of the game, all have their own energy bars, never leaving you scratching your head and wondering if your bullets are actually doing any sort of damage or not. There's also a decent amount of strategy with the level design and how you want to coax your enemies into a certain area to unleash death on them without getting hit. I asked Monty if there were any inspiration games behind Infestation's creation choices.
I've always wanted to make a scrolling platform game, and it's pretty easy to see that Turrican was an inspiration, but the exact gameplay style did change a bit during production. It started more as a Metroidvania, but ended up more of an arcade-style game.
The graphics style feels very unique, not something you can casually say about a 40-plus-year-old computer. It mixes in high-res visuals with very small, detailed pixel graphics, all animated exceptionally. Every major area has its own look and style, with very metallic space station vibes, but slowly changing to move to more organic designs the further you investigate the station and the plot unfolds. Your robot sidekick helps with story and setup for each area, giving you info on new gameplay elements and progression throughout the station, which is something usually missing from this style of game, plus full screen splash intros, a nifty intro to the game and ending, which all add a lot of production value to the overall look and vibe. I asked Monty how easy it is to make C64 games now with all the modern tools available.
I wouldn't necessarily say it's easy, but without modern tools there's no way I would be able to make C64 games. From pixel art applications to coding tools and online tutorials and help, there's never been a better time to be a C64 developer.
We interrupt our program to bring you this important message.
Power up!
The game's sound design by Monty as well is pretty great. It's got a lot of atmospheric soul cross style tunes with dark mysterious overtones that propel the story and action along and get really hyped up during all three of the major boss fights during the game, with a good mix of satisfying sound effects as well, which are played at the same time with an option to turn off the music if you so desire. I asked Monty if there was any major hurdles programming wise he had to overcome to deliver the game to the C64.
This was my first time writing a scrolling game, so that was a big challenge. I found tutorials on the web that really helped me getting the scrolling working, but that didn't help with things like the player and enemies, music and sound effects all happening at the same time. So that was a big technical challenge. Wasn't so much an issue, but just really pushed me as a coder.
Overall, Infestation is another new wave C64 gem to add to the Breadbox's impressive exclusive library. The action is both satisfying and strategic, with a great story and lots of atmosphere, and is very easy to pick up and play, almost like an old arcade game. Plus, with the passwords that are given out after completing every stage, you never have to redo everything all over again, and helps make playing it in small bursts much more enjoyable. Currently, it's a PAL format only game, but Monty says he'll be working on an NTSC version soon, so keep a lookout for that, and I'll leave links to his itch page for the digital download. And with that, I'll leave Monty with the final words as I asked him what is the drive to make C64 games still in the modern age.
For me, the challenge of the C64 restrictions really allow me to be creative. I love pushing the graphics so that it almost looks like it could pass for a 16-bit machine, but it's also the community support. I used to make games for iPhones and it was so hard to get noticed and get any engagement. The C64 community is so appreciative of new games, and sharing progress videos and chatting with people really helps to keep the motivation going.
And now let's stop this video for a few minutes and check out a whole bunch of honorable mentions. And here's my selection for some great games that just missed the top 10 spots. Bear in mind, it only represents a drop in the ocean of C64 releases for this year. And we'll be going very quickly, starting with Pentagorat 2 by Mika Misfit, a complete C64 remake of Pentagorat, a 2016 VIC-20 game, where you have to try to escape out of this massive deadly castle. It's a very cool little action-adventure game that's also available as a physical tape version from the Future Was 8-Bit website. Mushrooms That Grow in the Woods is a very cool early and 80s style maze collect 'em up game with 32 levels, tons of options. It's got a really fun retro styled look and plays very well and is quite addictive. Portal Buster by Dr. Mortal Wombat is a horizontal styled shoot 'em up in the Uridium vein, as you have to open doors to activate hyperspace jumps as you blast your way through each level. Lock and Chase is a great arcade conversion of many by LC Games for this classic 1981 arcade dot gobbler, and works on both PAL and NTSC systems. Legend of Wolf by Hazemaker is kind of an updated remake of Elite's Cockatony Wolf from 1984. It sports great updated graphics in the C64 style as opposed to the original specky look, and has some fun music as well. Night Mission Pinball Extended by Demo Scena Group Extend is a complete remake of Night Mission Pinball released originally by Sublogic. It's an impressive update visually and sound-wise, and plays a mean game of pinball. Drip was a C64 port of a 1989 Amiga game done by Vector 5. It's one of those paint-the-screen arcade games and has a great Richard Bayless soundtrack. They also made Drip 2. Shift by Haplo is also a C64 remake, bringing this cool brain-teasing black and white puzzler to the old Breadbox in top-notch style. And another excellent game by Haplo is the highly unique Binary Battle, where you have to literally fight your way through a virus on your computer one folder shoulder at a time. It's fun and a very original game. Corescape is another shooter by Dr. Mortal Wombat, this one of the vertical variety. It's tough as hell, but sports cool visuals and music. Identity Wars is a cool little two-player versus game where an Amiga and Atari ST owner have to verse each other to see which system reigns supreme. Random Pack was next, and as the game suggests, it's a randomly generated clone of 1980s Pac-Man, and another very impressive version of the game by LC Games. Mineshaft Gap is also by the very busy Dr. Mortal Wombat, and is a survival, build-your-own bunker post-nuclear game. There's not many of these types on the C64, so it actually feels pretty fresh to play. Nestor in Trail is a well-made graphic text adventure game by Marco Giorgini, and is a cool mystery as you try to unfold the story behind your master's research. Splatch is another Vector 5 game, this one a remake of an Amstrad 1985 game, and is basically a modern version of Boulder Dash. Mars Patrol is a really well done version of the arcade game Moon Patrol done by Millisoft. It has nice parallax scrolling and a great replication of the arcade's music and sound effects. Escape from the Metaverse by Space Moguls is a clever but very tough puzzle game with a great simplistic art style and is definitely worth playing. Tank in a Dungeon by Rozsoft is a cool game where you have to blast everything in a level to escape it. Plus, every second dungeon level is also randomly generated to spice things up. The Last Z8 by Dr. Terrors is a bizarrely addictive Petsky styled version of David Crane's Ghostbusters. It's worth trying it just for the pure weirdness. Broken Mirror by Quadgar Games is a cool menu style point and click adventure game similar to The Uninvited. It has a really good interface, graphics and somber music. Die Kaufman's Gilde by Wendigo is a typical game from them in a board game style affair as you open trade routes around Germany and try to beat multiple computer or human opponents. Cruising for a Bruising from Megastyle is a very fun single button styled endless runner, or driver in this case, with cool music and graphics. 2112 is an interesting style space trading and exploration game done by Digital Monastery. They never really make these styles of games anymore, so it's definitely worth a look. Orbex was next, a pretty cool mix of pinball and peggle as you have to destroy all the orange orbs in a level to progress. Nice game by Andy Norman. Gridlocked, another game by Megastyle, delivers excellent puzzle-based gameplay wrapped up in a package that includes great visuals and a pumping SID soundtrack. And lastly was another Wendigo production called Battle for Kronos. It's basically the movie Dune in turn-based action strategy wargame form. It's a little bit too simplistic, but it's definitely worth a look if you're a fan of this genre. And I personally just want to thank everybody that made C64 games on the old bread box this year. I'm sure everybody really appreciates it.
We interrupt our program to bring you this important message.
The Commodore 64 Arcade Multi-Version Special Number 2. Only on 64K.
And now let's check out the number one game.
And number 1 is...
Waking up, brewing some coffee, and turning on my favorite computer of all time, and hearing those familiar sounds as I load up an old favorite. Over 40 years later, the C64 never gets old, and the announcement of any new game for it gets me way more excited than any AAA release that the media tries to throw in my face. April 1st, 2024 was the day I found out about Teemo's Castle, a new C64 action platform adventure game, to be released in May, put together by some of the guys that did 2023's Bill and Ted's Game Boy port to the C64. It was a really good day. I was lucky enough to get to interview Roman Werner, designer, coder, and graphics part of the team, Pixelbra Games, who put together this fine piece of software, but I'll let him introduce himself.
My name is Roman Werner, I'm from Zurich, Switzerland, and I am the lead designer, coder and pixel shifter for Teemo's Castle. I'm part of the team Pixelbra Games, next to Ben Dibbert, well known as 8-bit musician under the label Nordic Sound, and Timo Weingärtner, the producer who triggered this whole project with his dream to be part of making a C64 game. Both my friends are from Germany.
The story for the game sees Teemo's parents murdered in a mysterious mysterious way, with the crime remaining unsolved. Timo inherits a castle he never knew his rich parents owned and heads out with his girlfriend to check the place out. It is, however, occupied and haunted by an evil witch in the cellar, and she captures Timo's girlfriend. It's now up to you to traverse the 8 stages of the haunted castle and destroy the witch and free your beloved. The game itself is a love letter to Henry's House, a 1984 C64 release, published by English Software and created by Chris Murray, a fun 8-level single-screen action platformer with clever attention to detail and well thought out tricky stages with their own personalities. Timo's Castle does an excellent job of taking these elements, replicating them, and of course improving on them, giving the game a new modern C64 new wave feel in looks and sound, and of course adding its own personality into the mix. I first asked Roman how long this game's been in development for.
Timo contacted me in October 2023 with a very passionate email. He asked me if I could support him in making his dream come true of being part of a C64 game development team. I usually work on my own, but thought that this would be something quite nice, to have a trustworthy partner in crime to work out ideas and share regular feedback. Timo's favorite C64 game used to be Henry's Castle, made in 1984, and so we started this journey based loosely on that single-screen platformer concept, where household things move around and some little actions are triggered while you explore the room. Since then we have invested most of our spare time and weekends to work on this game. Ben joined the team in January 2024 and contributed not only great music but also brought in fresh ideas how to make this game to something special.
The basic gameplay of Timo is one of action platformer variety. The castle is broken down into 8 rooms, each filled with enemies, haunted objects, and simple but very clever puzzle elements. You basically have to collect all the objects in a stage before a key is revealed. Grab the key and head for the exit to go to the next room. Sounds easy? Well, it's not that simple. The game is filled with unique elements, not only platforming, but as you pick up certain items, new elements are added to the room. More enemies come out of the woodwork, or items collected affect the room in some way, allowing you to continue collecting or opening new paths. I love how it makes what could be a very straightforward level into something fun to explore, with each major item triggering various elements. Every room feels different, like its own little puzzle, with things to discover and atmosphere to soak up. The game sports 2 difficulty settings. Normal has a timer, but if you want to take your time, easy eliminates that altogether. Another cool element, like Henry's House, is once you get to a new room, if you die you can continue from there and it doesn't slap you all the way back to the beginning, which is a nice touch. I asked Roman what was it about Henry's House that inspired the team to make this modern homage to it.
What I like about Henry's House is that it is colorful and has a distinctive style in mixing high-res and multicolor elements, and every room has its own characteristics and fun-looking enemies. The game is quite hard, but it was a nice feature that you could continue from the level you last lost your lives.
I really love the graphic style of this game. It feels retro, but it's very modern new wave C64 in style, with a massive attention to detail, mixing in traditional sprites and some high res in an exceptional way. The colors are so vibrant and pop out. Each stage has its own color scheme, and I also like how the whole screen is implemented, with a particular color which works its way into the background design. Considering this whole game is a single loader, it's very impressive. The animation is great, with each enemy having its own little pattern, background graphics as well, and many animations are triggered as the levels progress. Visually, it is so much fun to look at, and there's plenty of visual references to 80s and 90s movies and pop culture. They are all over the place, from references to Rocky Balboa and The Evil Dead and so much more. It's always fun to try to spot all these little Easter eggs. I asked Roman what major challenges did they encounter while putting this game together.
I had to make an early decision whether I want to make a single or multi-load game, and decided for the single. It just has its clear limits, and the amount of memory dictates more or less when the game is finished. I wasn't even sure if I could manage to squeeze character data, music, sprites and code for 8 rooms all into 64K. Somehow worked, and we could even make room for a final screen. But at the end it was a tedious job to find a byte here and there to implement the last touches.
The soundtrack gives you warm and fuzzy feelings with its upbeat but slightly deadly feeling capturing the vibe of the castle adventure, and the Scottish bagpipes have never sounded better in a C64 game. Nordish Sound really delivers a memorable soundtrack with a special track waiting for you once you complete the game. He also provides all the sound effects and musical cues in the game itself, which, like the visual cues, pay homage to pop culture of the past. I really got a good chuckle out of "Are you keeping up with the Commodore" jingle that's in there, plus many other little touches that'll make you smile. Lovely tunes by Nordish Sound, and proves he's just as good at making original music as he is at covering 80s and 90s pop rock tracks in SID form. I also asked Roman if he could give us a little bit more detail on the rest of the team that worked on Timo's Castle.
Timo Weingart is the producer, tester, bug hunter, and the man with the initial idea and vision for the game, and well connected in the Commodore scene. Timo and I decided early on that we wanted a hand-drawn cover art for our game. Timo managed to establish contact with the Turkish cover artist Ogan Kandemiroglu. The name should ring some bells since the Kandemiroglu brothers were responsible in the 80s and 90s for various stunning magazine and game covers, including the Terrican series, and Ogan drew us a fantastic cover. Timo is also a dedicated movie fan and loves everything from the 80s, in particular Sylvester Stallone, and don't be surprised to find some evidence on that in our game. Ben Dibbett, on the other hand, does not need any introduction since he is well known in the 8-bit music scene. As Nordish Sound, he usually produces one great cover song after the other and shares his creations on YouTube, Spotify and many other music related channels. I had already worked with him in context with my C64 conversion of Bill and Ted's excellent Game Boy adventure last year and feel honored to have him in the team. He also did a fantastic job for Timo's Castle.
We interrupt our program to bring you this important message.
Overall, I had a blast with this game. It literally came out of nowhere and surprised the hell out of me, in a pleasant way of course. It's filled with a lot of passion and design, and even the small touches are delightful, from Timo's Sonic the Hedgehog style animation if you leave the controller, to pressing the spacebar to take his glasses on and off. The game is filled with so much detail. As I was making this video, the game will be available in digital form in PAL format for use on the Mini, Maxi, Vice and of course real hardware. NTSC is being considered as I make this video, plus Bitmap Soft will be releasing a full physical boxed edition of the game as well. More info on the details are still being finalized, and I'll leave links to the digital game and Bitmap Soft in the video description. My final question to Roman was, with the C64's limitations, why still make a new game for the computer in the modern age?
C64 was basically my first computer, and the blue start screen always gives me happy vibes. It is so low level that it's completely on you if something works or not. I see the limitations actually as a blessing. Every C64 developer has more or less the same starting point, and it still fascinates me today what other people come up with. Also, I think the retro scene is much more appreciative than other game platform users. It is so much more rewarding to release an 8-bit game than something made for the iPhone, for example.
Timo's Castle. What else can I say? A really fun arcade romp made with a lot of love for the old bread box. Thumbs up from me. And that's it. Congratulations on all the top 10 Commodore 64 entries. It was already another stellar year of C64 titles. Thanks for joining me, Bastish B at 64K. I hope you had a good time. And if you can please like and subscribe, that'll be greatly appreciated. And I'll see you next time. Cheers.